And welcome. Hope you can all hear and see me okay. I'll check the chat room real quickly. I'm going to be flying solo this evening. Kathleen's in the chat room. There we are. Turn that mic down. There we go. All right. Everyone here, everything okay? See and hear? Give me the thumbs up in the chat room. All right, very good. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, everyone. Excellent. Let's see what the question is. Let's scan back up here before I start running. Okay. Okay, so there's a question right off the bat in the chat room. We'll go ahead and address that before we dive into things. Little touchback, little review. The microneedle array vaccine patch topic. Question is about the COVID testing and hydrogels. Hydrogels are not contained, as far as I know, are not contained within the PCR testing. Okay? PCR testing, as we've covered just recently, is testing for the genetic sequence of chromosome 8, which is found in virtually every human. According to the CDC's own list of chromosomes and labels for chromosomes, the 8th chromosome is labeled as COVID-19, which is not correct, as we've previously stated. However, it does chromosome 8 does come up as a positive for COVID-19 in the PCR testing. PCR is only able to test for genetic code. It's not actually able to test for the antigens produced by the immune system in response to the presence of COVID-19 virus. The hydrogels in the vaccine is a whole separate discussion. The hydrogels transport by way of magnetic nanoparticles, MNPs, which serve under an electrical stimulus or a Wi-Fi, such as 5G, a Wi-Fi stimulus or signal. They are provided their locomotion, their direction of travel, and even their morphology, their shape, twisting and whatnot within the body. And the body does not reject the hydrogels. The hydrogels themselves do not take any notice of their environment. They're not affected by their environment, and they deliver the quantum dots with the luciferase embedded in the dots. And if there is a vaccine, if there is a pharmaceutical agent, if there is an MNR, a messenger RNA or DNA component, it is carried by the hydrogels. Hydrogels acting as a transport medium. And they transport either a messenger RNA or a DNA-based genetic sequence, short sequence, that is functioning as a vaccine for the first time. DNA and messenger RNA-based vaccines have never been approved for use in humans, and they are, of course, being fast-tracked into phase 3 for the testing on humans for the production of antibodies. But the issue is that the hydrogels will transport through the cell membrane into the cytosol, into the cytoplasm, the cytosol of the cell, and penetrate the membrane surrounding the nucleus itself, delivering its package of either messenger RNA genome sequence, genetic sequence, or DNA, depending on which vaccine. The final point to the discussion is that the person's DNA, the host as it's known in the literature, DNA, will be permanently changed. And this is found in the peer-reviewed literature, and we've presented it in Untitled magazine. So hydrogel is delivering into the cell that DNA modifier embedded in the vaccine. The hydrogel will not be found in the testing. So I hope that answers the question. Okay? All right. All right. All right, all right, all right. I keep saying that. We are picking up with part 2 that we introduced Sunday in the live stream. And Sunday was very much packed with great spiritual information from my wife, Kathleen. She explained how we arrived at this topic of Beast 2 and BELLE 2, these accelerator, the KEKB accelerator complex in Japan, which contains the Beast 2 and Beast 2 and BELLE 2 detectors, which I will take apart and describe to you in some detail. Yes, this is going to be a technical Tuesday, but I'll try not to dive too deep to where it becomes extremely dry and boring, okay? I'd like to start off with scripture. I'm actually going to present 2. There was a mention of Neuralace by Elon Musk that he introduced, I think it was Friday or Saturday, by way of a video demonstration live stream in which they had embedded their Neuralink devices into the brain. These are antennas that are placed between the capillaries so that they are not causing bleeding within the brain. Between the capillaries, but more specifically between groups of neurons. They function as antennas for sending and receiving of signals. This is as Elon Musk describes it, this is the brain-computer interface, and we've published extensively about this in Untitled magazine and talked about in live streams as well. I'm going to bring in Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20 in just a moment regarding Neuralace, but I'll start with what I have on the screen, which is Isaiah 57:15. For thus says the one who is high and lifted up, who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in a high and holy place, and with the oppressed and humble of spirit, to restore the spirit of the lowly and revive the heart of the contrite. This is flying in the face of those filled with the hubris in science and technology, such that they believe that they can overcome, they can, in their hubris, improve upon God's design of humans, of animals, of plants, of the world itself. Thus, we are entitling this 2-part live stream series, Our Jurassic World, Cern, Beast 2, BELLE 2, because this is the terraforming of our world. This is the changing. And we've been focusing on, for several months, on DNA because of COVID-19. And what I'd like to do is give you the punchline right up front. I am connecting particle accelerator colliders with DNA. We're doing that within the pages of the September issue of Untitled magazine, and we'll do it tonight. The short answer, the short description in the headline of the connection between particle accelerators and colliders, particle physics, and DNA, the Jurassic world, the changing of DNA, the chimera, the hybrids. The connection is that they are all looking at the same particles. Those in particle physics are looking at the same particles that are contained within the human body. There is no difference. They are one and the same. Our bodies are composed of the fundamental particles found in atoms that the particle physicists are looking at, that they're accelerating, and that they're colliding. This is called trickle-down technology. You've heard of trickle-down economics. Those of you that were around, that are old enough, that were around at the time of President Reagan in the early 80s. And the phrase was coined trickle-down economics during the 80s. And of course there was rampant interest rates up to 18 and 20% for credit cards and whatnot, and sky high from there. This is not trickle-down economics, this is trickle-down technology. You are more familiar, perhaps, with technology derived from NASA, from space programs. In my world as a paramedic for 27 years in Oakland, one of the trickle-down technologies from NASA that I utilized was a portable EKG monitor and defibrillator. Because astronauts, through telemetry, were connected wirelessly, obviously, to NASA, to physicians, to flight surgeons who would monitor their heart rate, their blood pressure, and a whole host of things. This was the first real public example of biosensors, wireless biosensors, trickle down from NASA to paramedics, to hospitals and doctors and nurses and technicians. Well, today we're talking about trickle-down technology as it relates to particles, fundamental particles, things like electrons and protons, but also matter and antimatter. And in specifically, when we're talking about the synchrotron particle accelerator in Japan, at the facility known as KEK, K-E-K, they are actually colliding matter and antimatter, specifically electrons with a negative charge and electrons known as positrons with a positive charge. So they are working on, and again, a punchline for you, on a weapons system. They are publicly saying they are searching for dark matter. Well, at the same time that they are conducting that search, within the body of the search for dark matter, looking at things like B mesons, M-E-S-O-Ns, with the detectors, they are also looking at things like antimatter weaponry, because nothing escapes the military complex. The military, industrial, academic complex, all is the same, and that includes the intelligence complex. Those complexes all fund these programs. They all have their fingers in it. From the academic side, it is, of course, the PhDs, the engineers, the physicists, the theoretical and experimental physicists, the quantum physicists, the cosmologists. Those come by way of the academic sector, who are funded by the intelligence community, by governments around the world, even governments that are at war with each other, collaborate. And these experiments are known as collaborations. So you'll see something in the September issue coming out tomorrow, one day late, because we had some breaking information that just came to us yesterday and today. Some more today, in fact, that is being included. So we delayed the publication of the magazine by one day, and that will be tomorrow, probably tomorrow afternoon. But within that, we are identifying the fact that we have countries, and we provided a list of authors to one particular peer-reviewed paper, just as an example, in the magazine, with a list of those authors, scientists, and the countries of origin. And you will see in that list countries that are at war with each other, whether you're speaking economic warfare or actual shooting of bullets and weaponry warfare. And you have to ask your question from 40,000 feet on Patch Air. Why? How? How can these seemingly enemy states, sovereign states, collaborate within the world of science? How can they provide millions of dollars in funding to scientific projects? They do this at Cern all the time. This is how Cern operates. Russia and the United States, for example, China and the United States. we see Iranians, we see Saudis, of course we see Israelis. Virtually every country except the poorest of the countries of the world are involved in these collaboration experiments with well over 100 accelerators and colliders around the world. It's astounding when you look at the peer-reviewed papers. They're published papers that appear in the journals from these laboratories like Keck in Japan or Cern in Geneva, Switzerland. How many countries are actually working together? This is at 40,000 feet at the big picture level, at the highest echelon, if you will. This is where they collaborate. This is why they're all working towards the same agendas, and we've been sharing with you the agendas. Let me go to one very quickly, and I'm going to go to the second scripture to Mark in just a moment. But I have quoted this gentleman over the years very frequently, and I would like to quote him right now. Our good friend Sergio Bertolucci, Director for Research and Scientific Computing at Cern back in 2009. He no longer holds that position. November 6th of 2009, he stated in a public interview, and he's repeated this, out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it. And the longer version of this quote is, and we're not sure what might come through. Okay? They're collaborating from our 40,000 foot perspective. They are collaborating for a multitude of agendas. But in their search for dark matter, they speak openly, as did Sergio Bertolucci in 2009, spoke openly of accessing other dimensions. And I've quoted Geordie Rose from D-Wave, quantum computers, accessing 2 to the 500th power of parallel dimensions. They all talk about dimensions. And here, essentially, Bertolucci is describing a portal. Now, for most of you, this is nothing new. This is not news regarding the portal. But the trickle-down aspect to this is what I'm presenting to you in the magazine and in these two live streams. What is happening with these massive accelerators and colliders? Is the ability to identify particles smaller than atoms by way of their collisions and resulting energy signatures that describe their resting mass, describe their spin, quantum spin. They speak in terms of giga-electron volts for their masses, tera-electron volts in the case of Cern. But to give you a very, very tangible example, let me read from Entangled Magazine, September. This is my opening statement from my section in the magazine. Kathleen has published her opening statement as well, and I'll leave that to the magazine. There are direct correlations between particle physics and the bioengineering of human DNA and RNA. Particle physicists are working with the same materials as researchers of biology. The overall goal of the former is the discovery of so-called dark matter, while the latter, the deeper aspects of our DNA and RNA. The technologies employed in the research of atomic fundamental particles have significant applications in medicine. For example, the synchrotron particle accelerator at UC Berkeley played a central role in the mapping of the human genome. Synchrotron energies, known as gamma rays and X-rays, were employed in the research of DNA proteins. Specifically, what are referred to as hard X-rays, described as the brightest light on Earth. That's a synchrotron energy. This particular synchrotron is housed in a structure known as the Advanced Light Source Building. The physical folds of proteins were inferred by these hard X-rays and 3D computer modeled. Luciferase quantum dots were used in the constructing of these models. This laid the foundation to not only the mapping of the human genome, but to the manipulation of DNA and RNA in what I have referred to as in silico DNA, the rearrangement of DNA in computer software. The search for dark matter, and by so doing, opening a doorway to the abyss or interdimensional portal, may appear incongruous connecting particle physics with biology. It is a matter of interpretation in the meaning of the word abyss. The manipulation of matter within a particle accelerator collider, resulting in an opening to the infinite, is no different than altering DNA and RNA without fully understanding the infinite ramifications of such modifications. In the case of the mark of the beast delivering a DNA-altering vaccine by way of a quantum dot luciferase-embedded microneedle array, it is eternal damnation of one's soul. Okay? So, what we are examining here, what we are looking at here, is trickle-down technology specific to our DNA. The ability to identify particles such as electrons, B mesons, hadrons, quarks, gluons, and on, leads to the ability, and I presented this back in 2013, the ability at that fundamental particle, subatomic, smaller than an atom, level, being able to manipulate those fundamental particles discovered with particle accelerators by way of colliding particles together, that they themselves are smaller than atoms, protons, for example. The issue becomes the ability to manipulate those very small subatomic particles. You are able to actually begin at that level, subatomic level, to build the building blocks of DNA. From that scale, we're below the nanoscale. A nanometer, 1 nanometer, is a billionth of a meter. We are talking in scales of femtometers, trillionths of a scale, down into the pico scale. But at that level, being able to manipulate those particles, primarily be able to manipulate their spin, quantum spin, what they call half-integer spin. You are able to then construct atoms of your own design. From your own designer atoms, you can build designer molecules. From that, you can, in DNA, you can build designer proteins. This happens in the computer, in silico DNA, designer proteins. Because as I said, utilizing a particle accelerator, that because the particles are held to a curved pathway by magnets, bending steering magnets, you are realizing gamma rays and hard X-rays that are produced by the radiation effect of those particles moving in a curved trajectory. Think of it almost like those energies result from centrifugal force. They really don't, but it's kind of like, let's say you had a tennis ball on a string and this tennis ball was dipped in water and now its surface is coated in water, and you swing that tennis ball around over your head faster and faster, and that water begins to, because of centrifugal force, be carried out away. and it's carried out orthogonally at right angles to the trajectory that that ball is traveling in. Same thing with electrons, protons. Okay? So those hard X-rays are then used to infer. They cannot visualize, but they infer because of changes to the hard X-rays, changes to their wavelength that are disturbed by the presence of subatomic particles. They're able to determine the shape of proteins in DNA, leading to the computer modeling, 3D modeling, of the protein folding of those DNA proteins. And once you have the model, you understand how they're constructed. And once you understand how they're constructed, you can build your own models of DNA proteins. And you're building up, you're building out from there. And I'm looking right now, I think I have an old graphic of that, perhaps, that I can show you. Give me just a second. It's always nice to have a different graphic up. Okay, well, I'll look for it. The point is that if you're able to build these proteins of DNA, you understand how they're expressed by the cells, by the nucleus, how they're expressed by the RNA that then produce, because of gene expression, they're able to produce outside the cell the proteins. Proteins like the spike protein on the surface of the COVID-19 virus can be identified. And once you can identify those spike proteins, you can develop a vaccine that will trigger, at an attenuated level, trigger the immune system to produce the antigens that will fight, that will actually attack those spike proteins. So when I have said in the past that COVID-19 is a man-made artificial construct virus, and I still believe it's at the low level of contagion, or its virality, how viral it is still no more contagious. It's not any stronger than the seasonal flus that we experience every year. But nonetheless, it's an artificial construct. And in this trickle-down technology from particle accelerators and colliders and the ability to model protein, and then from the fundamental particle subatomic level, actually construct your own designer in silico, modeling your own proteins, you then are able to build your own RNA, and then from RNA, DNA in the computer. You haven't output anything into the biological realm yet. You're modeling it. And what I mean more specifically is you now are able to model your own genome sequence. You can take your nucleic acids and your proteins, and you can construct your own RNA, which then produces the double helix. RNA is a single strand, the double strand, double helix of DNA. Okay? So this whole trickle-down process of building in the computer can then be output, and if you look at the research of Dr. Craig Venter, mentioned him many, many times, if you look at this, they are able to use the computer model in silico DNA and transmit that digitized DNA code through the cloud to a receiver, to a resequencing machine, combined with a biological 3D printer. Using the 4 base nucleotides, they are able to print out from that code, from that model, that in silico model of the proteins and of the sequence of the nucleic acids. They can actually use nucleic acids to print out an entirely new life form. They're not creating life. They have to use a living substrate. Think of a petri dish having an agar or a sugar medium, okay, a growth medium to provide food. to an organism. What they're doing is they're starting with E. coli bacteria because it's alive and it's robust and it replicates very quickly. And they take this artificially arranged sequence of nucleotides and proteins and present them to the E. coli virus. And from that, they will grow. And this is all in the literature. This goes back to 2010. Grow an entirely new life form. They're not creating life. They're modifying it. They're creating a hybrid. Again, from in silico DNA. This sounds very much like science fiction. As we've always said, this is scientific fact. We are reporting the facts to you. Okay? This is the trickle down from particle accelerators. And we're sharing with you an entirely different accelerator complex in Japan that also is a proof of concept, like other accelerator complexes, such as Brookhaven National Laboratory's relativistic heavy ion collider. They perform experiments, proof of concept, and they take their results and send them to Geneva, to the big machine, to the LHC. Their technologies carry over to Cern to enhance, to upgrade the largest, most powerful, most expensive machine in recorded human history. I really wanted to find that. Let me see. Give me just another second. I have to find that. I try to save most of these graphics because so many of these live streams fold over one another. They cross over one another. Okay, let's move on. I want to go to Mark 5, 1 through 20. I'm going to take a moment to read this. This takes us back to Elon Musk. But not just is this applicable to the Neuralink, the brain-computer interface device, but this takes us to what is going on spiritually within these accelerator complexes. Now, the average physicist, cosmologist, particle physicist, quantum mechanics, researcher, engineer, they have no clue. They have no clue that they're serving Satan. Some of them perhaps do, but the guys that are setting the agenda, the ones that are providing the funding, the ones that are determining what goals they want to achieve at a given accelerator laboratory complex, they fully know that this is spiritual. They know that the technologies they're developing in their search for dark matter is leading to the opening of the abyss. They know that their discovery of particles such as quarks bound by gluons produce a quark-gluon plasma, also known as a condensate, with the name strangelets. That's in the September issue of Entangled. December of 2018, an entire issue was devoted to strangelets. Combine those two. Strangelets are the most explosive substance in the known universe, according to mainstream science. It is a weapons system. To what end? What we've said many times, Satan in his hubris believes he can kill God and his angels. Strangelets will be deployed. So, in that, understand that the spiritual aspects are fully at work here. You cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. You cannot separate the physical from the spiritual. They work hand in hand. Okay? That's for the benefit of new patrons, perhaps have not heard me make those statements, but I think they've been fully ingrained into most people's memories by now. You cannot separate the physical from the spiritual. Okay? Mark chapter 5, verse 1. On the other side of the sea, they arrived in the region of the Gerasenes. Pardon my pronunciation. I'm from California. As soon as Jesus got out of the boat, he was met by a man with an unclean spirit who was coming from the tombs. Now, tombs. I'm going to parenthetically make some injections here. Tombs. The Keck, the accelerator at Keck in Japan, is 100 feet underground. The detectors are buried in the ground. Cern, they are 300 feet underground. The main ring in the detectors, where all the action takes place, 300 feet underground. Tombs, caves, sanctuaries. This man had been living in the tombs and could no longer be restrained, even with chains. Think about that. Accelerators are releasing particles that are normally bound together and combining particles that normally do not come together. They're breaking chains. Though he was often bound with chains and shackles, he had broken the chains and shattered the shackles. Now there was no one with the strength to subdue him. Night and day in the tombs and in the mountains, he kept crying out and cutting himself with stones. Now, when Cern is operating, when the accelerator at Keck is operating, they operate night and day in the tombs, in the caves, underground. And these are in the mountains. And he kept crying out and cutting himself with stones. Now I'm stretching it, perhaps stones, particles, cutting. Those are collisions, fracturing the stones, cutting the stones in the collisions within the accelerators. And he kept crying out. That's the luminosity. Those are the energy releases. Those are the signatures, are the sounds. At Cern, they have actually converted the energy signals of fundamental particles through a computer software program into audible sounds. The sounds of particles, that stones that have been cut, that have been collided, that have been broken, are crying out. Verse 6, when the man saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees before him. And he shouted in a loud voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you before God not to torture me." For Jesus had already declared, "Come out of this man, you unclean spirit." "What is your name?" Jesus asked. "The spirit," I'm adding, the spirit replied. "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus repeatedly not to send them out of that region. There on the nearby hillside, a large herd of pigs was feeding. Now, why do I bring this up? Because Elon Musk used as his demonstrators of their neural link device embedded in the brains. They were in the brains of pigs. You cannot separate the physical from the spiritual. There on the nearby hillside, a large herd of pigs was feeding. So the demons begged Jesus, "Send us to the pigs so that we may enter them." You don't think Elon Musk is getting information from forbidden angels? From the spiritual side? Just look at his wife. If you've never gone to Google Images and looked for images of the wife of Elon Musk, you're in for a treat. Verse 13, he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and went into the pigs, and the herd of about 2,000 rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the water. The pigs didn't want to be possessed. They killed themselves. What happens when a man or woman takes the mark of the beast? They are indwelt with the spirit of the Antichrist, and for 5 months they try to kill themselves. They seek death and cannot find it. Verse 14, those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it described what had happened to the demon-possessed man and also to the pigs, and the people began to beg Jesus to leave their region. You see, not only will people seek death and not find it as a result of their taking the mark of the beast, but they will turn away from Jesus, turn away from God, continue in their sin, continue to pledge their allegiance to the image of the beast. They are demon-possessed once they take the COVID-19 vaccine. Their soul is damned to perdition for all of eternity. Though they may have some concept of what they've created, these scientists, these engineers, those in a position to fund all of this work, all of this technology, they will at some point realize what they've been involved in. And they will find that their hearts fail because of what they behold that they've been involved in. Verse 18, and he was getting into the boat. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by the demons begged to go with him, but Jesus would not allow him. Go home to your own people, he said, and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown. Folks, that applies to you and me. We, through the grace of God, have been saved. If you will, we were possessed in our fallen state. The demon or demons were cast out of us. We were born again. We were changed. Satan is trying to change humanity that has not been changed, not been born again through the blood of Jesus Christ. Satan is trying to change the blood, the DNA of humanity. It's his counterfeit. It's his mirror image of what God has done for us in his grace and his mercy to you and I. But Satan is not benevolent. This is purely malevolent. But he's copying the methodology of our salvation in a malevolent fashion. Jesus saying, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you. Applies to you and I. That is our commandment to occupy, to spread the good news, the gospel. Verse 20. So the man went away and began to proclaim throughout the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. And I hope that people will be amazed when they hear from you and your testimony about the microneedle array, about this trickle-down technology. Because it's too easy to look at these large machines, to look at these colliders, and think, oh, that has nothing to do with me. That's not relevant to my everyday walk of life. I don't care what they do at Cern. I don't care what they do at Keck in Japan. It's not going to affect me. Well, I'm here to pass on the information that it does, because they're going after each and every person's DNA. When we hear Bill Gates of hell say that his goal is 100% vaccine compliance for the entire global population, that means that how they were able to produce the quantum dots, luciferase, vaccine, hydrogel, microneedle array, vaccine patch, all came from the work of particle physics and quantum mechanics. In the September issue, I do a little bit of repeating of things we've published in the magazine before, specific to quantum dots. The quantum dots were used, and I'll go back to Berkeley again that I was talking about with the synchrotron particle accelerator, hard X-rays, protein folding. With proteins, they were marking the proteins, the construct, the components making up the proteins, that they were modeling in three-dimensional models of their, what I call, curly-Q pasta configuration. They were utilizing quantum dots with luciferase. Again, I want to take you back to 2009, 2010, the human genome being mapped even before that. Luciferase has been utilized since the 1990s in particle physics. I give you some of the background in the magazine. But to stay on point here, the proteins were marked with quantum dots. The quantum dots all had different pastels of colors. Those colors were the colors of luciferase. And they were marked so that they could track them. And by tracking them, they could combine them. They could reconfigure them. This is the building blocks of atoms, to molecules, to quantum dots, carried over into now the microneedle array, utilizing quantum dots and luciferase. This is trickle-down technology from particle colliders. That's why it's relevant to our everyday walk of life. What they're doing at the large scale in terms of machines that are large, examining the infinitesimally small components of the universe, is transferred, that technology is transferred into medicine. Okay? I've mentioned KEK-B. K-E-K is the name of the research facility, and B has to do with the BELLE detector and the BEAST detector. You'll see BELLE up here, okay? And that is contained, that's a detector, and there's pictures in the magazine. That is a detector that is inserted into a larger detector machine that is 3 stories tall, weighs multiple tons, known as the BEAST. Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast, as in the book, the novel, the Disney movie, Beauty and the Beast. Look at the beast with the horns. Beast is the name of the detector, and BELLE is inserted into the beast. This glass jar holding the rose, which here appear to be as fundamental particles just after a collision in an accelerator, This is known as a bell jar. Her name is Belle. Belle, if you look at the definition of Belle, the translation of Belle, is for beauty. A woman or a girl of beauty. So let's stop right there in our definitions. Because when we're talking about beauty, we're also talking about particle physics. We are also talking about quantum mechanics. A fundamental particle that I've mentioned, quarks, as in quark gluon condensate, known as strangelets, a quark gluon condensate plasma. Quarks come in different configurations. In the case of beauty, within the BELLE of the BELLE detector, within the BEAST detector as the larger machine, we're talking about a quark that is described as a beauty quark. This is a bottom quark. What happens is higher energy, heavier top quarks decay down to a stable bottom quark. The bottom quarks are the quarks that they are trying to detect. This is in the pursuit of identifying the matter of dark matter and the energy signature of dark energy. This leads to their discovery and the opening of a portal, the abyss. You cannot separate the physical from the spiritual. Beauty is a name for quarks, a label for a group or a classification of quarks, beauty. Thus, they are pursuing bottom quarks with their detectors in their collision of negative electrons and positron positively charged electrons, the antimatter of electrons, colliding matter and antimatter together. Look at the bell jar. Look at the particles. This is why one of the detectors, the smaller one, is called BELLE, because they're going after a beauty quark, a bottom quark, with a detector that detects beauty, thus calling it BELLE. The other detector is BEAST. In our edition of Entangled magazine entitled A New Jurassic Era, on the cover, and I sent this to you earlier, we have BEAST 2, the emblem, the symbol, the label, if you will, of the machine, the Super KEKB Commissioning Detector and BELLE 2 collaboration. On that is BEAST 2 in Japanese, and the red figure of the dragon known as Godzilla. These are scientists, okay? BEAST, the larger 3-story tall detector that BELLE as a collaboration experiment, the BELLE detector itself is inserted within the larger machine. BEAST stands for the acronym Beam Exorcism for a Stable BELLE Experiment. The BEAST experiment, a background detector for the commissioning of the BELLE experiment at the KEKB factory in Tsukuba, I guess it is, Tsukuba, Japan. Now let's define exorcism. Interesting they would choose that word. I think they were stretching to make a point when they called the BEAST the beam exorcism for a stable BELLE experiment. But why would they go to that length, to that degree of stretching out to create, to fit beast? Because you cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. Exorcism, binding by oath in the Greek. Binding by oath. They took those that are running the agendas of Keck and Cern and others, they've taken an oath to Lucifer. Exorcism, binding by oath, is the religious or spiritual practice of evicting demons or other spiritual entities. Remember the pigs, remember the swine, okay? Is the religious or spiritual practice of evicting demons or other spiritual entities from a person or an area that is believed to be possessed. Depending on the spiritual beliefs of the exorcist, this may be done by causing the entity to swear an oath, performing an elaborate ritual, or simply by commanding it to depart in the name of a higher power. The practice is ancient and part of the belief system of many cultures and religions. Let's take this apart a little bit. By causing the entity to swear an oath, if one wants to gain access to forbidden knowledge, if one wants to communicate with fallen angels, one must swear an oath, must swear an allegiance, must pledge an allegiance, must take a mark, a sign of allegiance, of having sworn an oath to the first image of the beast, the dragon, Godzilla. Performing an elaborate ritual. Think about the video I shared with you last week from Cern. Their elaborate ritual, known as Symmetry. It was a dance. It was a ritual. And go 100 kilometers in Switzerland from Cern in Geneva to the Goddard Tunnel. The elaborate ritual of the opening of the tunnel, the Goddard Tunnel in Switzerland. You've all seen that ritual. The tunnel relates not only to Cern, the fact that it's in a tomb, it's in a tunnel. They tunneled out the rock so that they could lay the main ring of the Large Hadron Collider within the rock, within the tunnel. That relates to the Goddard Tunnel. But something that most people have not picked up on regarding the Goddard Tunnel itself and why they chose this elaborate ritual, which is the summoning of the Antichrist spirit, the birthing of a new race, all in their dance, in their ritual. The tunnel aspect itself, it has been missed by most people. In quantum mechanics, specifically in quantum computing, within the qubit chipset, there is something that is known as quantum tunneling. Now, I won't get elaborate about this. I've published this in the magazine many times. Quantum tunneling basically means that they are tunneling through the base, much like the base of a mountain, of the energy curve, tunneling through to the lowest energy state, known as the ground state, in order to arrive much quicker and with less energy at a solution. Quantum tunneling, quantum computing, the Goddard Tunnel. Okay? All right. So the beast has to do with this detector and exorcism. They purposely chose those names. They purposely put the two together. And if you look at the beast, obviously he looks like depictions of the devil with the horns. Now in the cartoon, he's a lion. They've taken the horns off. Okay? Quark-gluon plasma. Let's talk about that a little bit. You've all heard about the God particle, the Higgs boson. Well, in the theoretical model of how the universe was created, the Big Bang, in the timeline of the hadron known as the Higgs boson, the quark-gluon plasma gave rise to the God particle. You never hear anybody talk about quark-gluon plasma. Not in the media. Cern's published many papers about it. Keck has published many papers about quark-gluon plasma. They're studying the quark-gluon plasma. They know that it is a material that is highly explosive because it gave rise to the solid matter. Plasma is a fourth state. It's not solid matter. It's not a gas. It's not a liquid. It's not solid. It's a fourth state. It gave rise to matter, the solid state, the hadronic phase. The hadrons, hence Large Hadron Collider, the boson, known as the Higgs boson. It did that explosively. It's highly unstable. You cannot contain this plasma. And there are scientists who have published over the years warnings, papers warning about quark-gluon plasmas being created at Cern. That first took place. It was theorized back in the early 80s. Quark-gluon plasma was theorized in the 80s. And they began conducting experiments in the 90s. And in 1999, they proved the existence of quark-gluon plasma. And then in 2000, Cern began producing it in minute quantities, but producing it. And this takes place by way of collisions of protons against one another, proton to proton, but also heavy ions of lead. Lead that has been stripped of its electrons is known as an ion. Taking heavy ions of lead and colliding them with protons at Cern, and at Brookhaven National Laboratory, colliding relativistic heavy ion collider. Relativistic means near the speed of light. Heavy means lead or gold that are stripped of electrons, and gold and lead at both Cern and Brookhaven being collided together or collided with protons, producing this plasma. And when they do that, they realize a resting mass and energy signature of 10 tera electron volts or higher. That's the threshold at which quark-gluon plasma, the most explosive material in the known universe, is produced. It's a weapons system. This is a weapons program funded by the military complex, funded by the Department of Energy, specifically in the United States. Most of these programs receive most of their funding from the U.S. Department of Energy, including other laboratories that they collaborate with outside the United States, like Keck in Japan. This is a weapons program. And since 2000, both Brookhaven National Laboratory and Cern have continued to produce this plasma. And because it cannot be contained, it plummets through the floor of the detector. In the case at Cern, it is the ALICE detector. Also CMS is involved. The compact muon solenoid CMS detector, as well as ATLAS and principally ALICE. But plummet through the floor of these detectors to the center of the Earth, to the core, where it is magnetically neutral. And as scientists have published the warning that once strangelets, the quark gluon plasma, arrives at the core of the planet, it begins to attract ordinary matter to itself. This is done through electromagnetism. As the strangelets gather more material, they become more compact, denser, and this is the scenario that results in a neutron star. Now, that isn't going to happen anytime soon, but that can have tectonic earthquake effects upon the Earth. Okay? Okay. Now, there's something else to share with you. This is the large detector. This is BEAST. Okay? This is the full size. You see the people to give it scale. And within that, they are placing the BELLE detector. Okay? This is the placing within the BEAST detector itself. This is the BEAST device. Let me correct that. This is the BEAST device here down in the lower portion that's being inserted into the main detector. This is known as the BELLE collaboration. This is where the scientists all get together to build the BEAST detector. Looks like this long cylinder, and they insert it within that larger machine. So let me go back to that. They insert it within the central core, and this is where the beam lines. Here you have positrons. These are positive electrons, antimatter, and electrons with a negative charge, matter. This is 7 giga-electron volts. That's the resting mass of these electrons, and 4 giga-electron volts of the antimatter. This is called asymmetry. This is colliding asymmetrically because they're different resting masses, asymmetrical collision. Okay? In the theory of symmetry, this is why Cern chose the name Symmetry for their music video, their dance, their ritual video, is that there's something called charged particle violation, or CPV. A violation of symmetry. Symmetry, the hypothesis is the cosmos, the universe, is made up of matter and antimatter. Now, all matter theoretically has its antimatter mirror, its twin, not just electrons, but all matter theoretically has its antimatter counterpart. And that there should be, according to the hypothesis of symmetry, there should be an equal amount of matter to antimatter in the universe. But through detectors, through measurements, specifically measurements of gamma rays striking our atmosphere, which function as particle accelerators. These are high energy rays that function as accelerated particles striking the particles of our atmosphere and causing collisions to take place. In the detection of those collisions, which these colliders at Cern and Keck and others are mimicking on a large machine scale, they are mimicking what is taking place naturally within our atmosphere all the time. Gamma rays are accelerated particles that then collide with oxygen and nitrogen and hydrogen and other trace elements in the atmosphere. And they cause those elements in the atmosphere, those molecules and atoms, to come apart, to fracture, to disintegrate into more fundamental particles. So they have used detectors like neutrino detectors to identify those more fundamental particles that naturally occur in a natural accelerator in the atmosphere, resulting in collisions. It requires these 3-story multi-ton devices, these detector arrays, so all around the vertex detector in the middle are other detectors. You'll see the KL-muon detector and the calorimeters, that's a measure of energy, surrounding the central core where the collision takes place. That is copying what happens in our atmosphere all the time. So the symmetry here is being violated. They are detecting in the atmosphere, they're detecting with satellite-based detectors out in the cosmos, that there is a smaller quantity of antimatter to ordinary matter. That is known as charged particle violation of symmetry. And they're trying to figure out, why is there this imbalance of matter versus antimatter? This takes us back to dark matter. Science claims somehow they've measured this. Dark matter has never been detected, thus it's never been measured, thus it has never been reproduced experimentally in the laboratory. All of the hallmarks of the scientific method, they have never scientifically proven the existence of dark matter. However, they've arrived at a number, such as the hubris. They claim that there's, in this violation of symmetry, that there is somehow 27% dark matter, making up the difference between ordinary matter and antimatter. 27% they've assigned that number to dark matter. Now they're trying to find dark matter. So they build these colliders. They collide fundamental particles together. They look for even smaller, more fundamental particles arising from those fundamental particles, like electrons, thinking that the higher the energy they can produce in a collider, which is why they're upgrading colliders all the time, like they're doing with the LHC at Cern, higher and higher collision energies produced, which result in smaller and smaller fundamental particles and higher energy signals, energy signatures, luminosity, which also means the number of particles colliding, luminosity. The more they can do this process, the closer they think that they can come to discovering dark matter and ultimately the singularity. Okay? The super KE-KB luminosity projection chart. Back here in 2018, peak luminosities in the yellow line here. This is what they're projecting luminosity by year. Okay? And the integrated luminosity is in green. This is what they claim that this collider will be able to achieve, be able to accomplish. Cern had been the leader in peak luminosity and integrated luminosity up until June of this year, and I've published the results in the magazine for September. But Cern congratulated KEK-B in Japan for achieving the highest peak luminosity and integrated luminosity on the planet. They did that this year with the super KE-KB. Let me go back on camera here. What I'm driving at here, folks, and I know this sounds a little dry, it's Technical Tuesday, when they are trying to discover dark matter, 27% of the known universe, they not only are looking for smaller and smaller fundamental particles and their energy signatures, but they are trying to discover the singularity. That particle, that single particle that gave rise to the Big Bang, which is their operating theory, okay? They believe that by colliding at higher and higher energies, they are going to be able to discover the singularity. That's what they've been promised. Okay? They've been promised by Lucifer answers, claiming that there is a starting point in the universe. So what did God do in Genesis? He spoke everything into existence. Let's break that into two components, because it demonstrates the hubris of Satan to say that he can provide the answers to how the universe came into existence. See, he's leading humanity into thinking they can discover the origins of the universe, what they call new physics. The process of discovering the singularity is called new physics. There's the standard model of physics, and there is new physics, NP as they abbreviate it. Well, God, in his ultimate ability of creation, he spoke everything into existence, didn't he? Well, when you speak, you are transmitting energy. A sound wave, which has to travel through a medium, through our atmosphere, through water, through solid material. A medium. Interesting word, isn't it? But God spoke, and thus he projected first, not matter, but energy. He spoke everything into existence. The first part is the projecting of energy, speaking. The second part, he spoke everything into existence. He created. He said, "Let there be light." Photons. They want to call it the Big Bang. All they have to do is read the Bible. Energy came first and then matter. Photons. The word quantum comes from the measurement of photons. A grouping, a bunch, a grouping, a quantity of photons is known as a quanta. So when the word quantum gets battered around and published and labeled on everything, quantum this and quantum that, understand that quantum means quanta, which means an amount, a grouping of photons. Let there be light. Okay? So I think it helps to break this down, but Satan has duped man into thinking that there's something missing. Just like in the discussion of DNA, he has deceived man into thinking that there are errors in the human genome, errors in our DNA. And through his hubris, he says, you know what, we can do one better than God. Let's take particle physics, let's take quantum mechanics, which all arises out of the Kabbalist belief system. I've covered that. Kathleen and I have talked about and published all about Kabbalism, not that we're experts in it, but enough that we've been able to demonstrate that what is behind the model of the universe for modern science, what is behind the technology, what is behind quantum mechanics, has been designed, that paradigm has been put forth by the Kabbalists to the academic and scientific community. So they believe through the Kabbalist paradigm that there's an error in our DNA, and that can be changed through particle physics and quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics being the umbrella over all scientific disciplines. Particle physics being closely associated, but still under the umbrella of quantum mechanics. And therefore, through particle physics, they are changing our DNA. Because Satan has said, hey, there's dark matter out there. There's something missing in the universe. Hey, there's errors in the DNA. So we're going to correct both at the same time. Talk about hubris. We're going to discover what's missing in the universe, the 27%. We're going to discover dark matter, dark energy. Because God hid it from us. God is hiding the truth from you. How many times has Satan said that? God is hiding the truth from you. Right? This is what they believe in the Luciferian belief system. They believe that God has denied the truth to man. They believe that Satan is the light bearer of truth. The Advanced Light Source Building at Berkeley, as an example. Okay? Luciferase with quantum dots in particle physics. Luciferase. Luciferase. Okay? It's not by chance this luminous material was given the label Lucifer, because it telegraphs to the world who they are worshiping. Lucifer. That's easy to figure out, isn't it? That's why everybody's jumping up and down when Kathleen and I broke the news about Luciferase. In the microneedle array patch, God's sense of humor, the patch. When we broke the news that it contained quantum dots illuminated in the near-infrared light spectrum, energies, electromagnetic spectrum of Luciferase, the world went crazy with the word Lucifer. Well, as I said, it's been around since the 80s in particle physics with colliders, accelerators and colliders. It's been around ever since they began examining DNA and the human genome and mapping it using particle accelerators and colliders. That's why it's relevant to us. I keep saying this. I always want to make this relevant to our everyday walk of life. What's relevant to us regarding dark matter and the singularity and the pursuit of that is the opening of the abyss. Remember, there's multiple ways to interpret, in the modern context, ancient scripture. Scripture tells us the abyss will be open. The angel is cast out of heaven, the fallen angel, and he's given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opens it, and the smoke arises, right? What's relevant to us as humans? It's not so much relevant to us as those that are saved. We won't be here when the abyss is opened. That happens when the Holy Spirit, the restrainer, is lifted. But the abyss will open. That's the endpoint result of the search for dark matter using particle accelerators and colliders. This is the charged particle violation of symmetry, matter and antimatter. So we have the portal to the abyss. Okay? Over on the other side of the same discussion, two sides of the same coin, the abyss on one side, the other side is the modification of DNA as a result of quantum dots, hydrogel, luciferase. Okay? If you have questions about luciferase, quantum dots, and hydrogel, please read the last 3 editions of Entangled magazine. They are available to all of the patrons. They're available to subscribers, of course, of Entangled. But the last 3 editions, June, July, and August, are on the homepage at anthonypatch.com. And when you click in the center on the large image of the cover of each magazine, those covers will link out to the PDF that you can download for free and distribute as you care to for free. On the right-hand side is a navigation bar, navigation column that shows small thumbnails of the magazine covers. Don't click on those because they're not linked. Click on the larger image of the magazine covers, and that will give you plenty of information about luciferase, quantum dots, and hydrogel. Okay? This hydrogel, again, is emphasized. Someone asked earlier, hydrogel is emphasized in the August edition, the abomination that causes desolation that you'll see on the cover. The August edition, we talk quite a bit about hydrogels in the magazine. Okay? Alrighty. So I'm just kind of helping out the chat room here with a question. So what's in it for us? The opening of the abyss for those that are unsaved, and the changing of the DNA by way of taking the mark of the beast. Very simple, but also very complex. When you look at the components, you look at the depth of what's going on in particle physics. They cross over. The technology that trickles down to DNA, that's what's relevant to us. That's why we've been paying attention to Japan and Keck and Keck B, Beauty and the Beast. That's why we've highlighted that, focused on that for the September issue of Entangled magazine. Okay? Because it is relevant to us. All right. Check my notes here. I'm not going to present it here tonight, but I'll just write this down if you care to. As we've noted with the Beauty and the Beast names, okay, and Godzilla, in fact, with the Beast, and exorcism in the acronym BEAST. Back at Cern, they have above ground a detector by the name Methuselah, M-A-T-H-U-S-L-A. Yes, that Methuselah. Remember, he awakens from his sleep, Methuselah? So look at that detector. Why do they choose these names? Methuselah, Beast. Because it's all spiritual. You cannot separate the physical from the spiritual. This is a spiritual pursuit with a spiritual entity and other spiritual entities. This is a spiritually driven, guided, steered, forbidden knowledge given spiritually through these mechanisms. One of the primary mechanisms are quantum computers, beginning with D-wave quantum computers. These are interdimensional communications devices based on geomancy, a divination process. That's all that all computers are. They're tools of divination. What's the purpose of divination? It is to communicate with fallen angels. It is to prognosticate the future, to determine auspicious and inauspicious days in which to do things. Again, we've covered this extensively. But it is all spiritual in nature. Do you really think that scientists were able on their own to dream up Cern? To dream up a Large Hadron Collider? To dream up the Keck B and Super-Keck B in Japan, and others, Brookhaven National Laboratory, all these accelerators and colliders. Do you really think, and I know I'm speaking rhetorically to this audience because you already know, but to the general public that'll listen to this later on YouTube in a couple of days, do you really think that scientists are that clever, that smart, that they could dream up all of these machines, all of these detectors on their own? That they could figure out how to accelerate particles at Cern to 99.99% the speed of light? Okay? That's known as ultra-relativistic. It doesn't mean they go beyond the speed of light in the acceleration of matter. It's just under. Ultra-relativistic. Relativistic means the speed of light. That they could actually, on their own, figure out how to accelerate particles that would then travel 17 miles, 27.5 kilometers, around a ring 11,000 times per second. So 99.99% the speed of light translates to an RPM, revolutions per minute, of 11,000 RPM per second of an individual particle. You really think they'd figure out how to do that on their own? It's like the Nazis and the so-called Vril Society, but their worship of the occult realized tremendous advances in war machinery, in war engineering. We all know that. Now look at what's going on now. Look at what's going on now. The technology that has been gained through occult practices today. Again, quantum computers are occult devices. When Geordie Rose says they're accessing 2 to the 500th power, and today it's 2 to the 2000th power of parallel dimensions, that's communicating with fallen angels. Okay? I don't have to make it up. I just report on it. There's no conjecture here. These are facts. This is factual. And God is revealing this to all of us. Let me go back through some of my slides here. Do you remember when I spoke about AWAKE, the Advanced Wakefield Experiment at Cern? Looking at Wikipedia on the screen here, it is a proof of principle experiment which investigates Wakefield plasma acceleration using a proton bunch as a driver, a worldwide first. It aims to accelerate a low-energy witness bunch of electrons from 15 to 20 mega-electron volts to several giga-electron volts over a short distance, 10 meters, creating a high acceleration gradient of several giga-electron volts per meter. Okay? AWAKE was a 10-meter long linear accelerator that was accelerating electrons using pre-accelerated bunches of proteins that came out of the superproton synchrotron accelerator at Cern. There's a daisy chain beginning with a linear accelerator called LINEAC 4. It was LINEAC 2, but now they brought on a more modern accelerator, LINEAC 4, that then goes to the proton circular base, proton PS, proton synchrotron accelerator, that then sends those accelerated particles into another accelerator, ring-based, which is known as SPS, the superproton synchrotron. And in that circular accelerator, particles are accelerated like protons to roughly 450 giga-electron volts. Then they are directed over, in this case, to a wake. Ordinarily, they'd be directed into the main ring of the Large Hadron Collider for further acceleration and then collisions, utilizing two oppositely traveling particle beams that are then crossed or allowed to strike head-on within a detector. Well, they will take from the superproton synchrotron those accelerated protons in bunches as a driver and allow them to travel into the 10-meter long tube of a wake. And then using plasma, they are able to create, much like surfing waves, okay, surfing on the top, on the leading edge at the peak of a wave, which is what a surfer does. They use plasma wake fields to accelerate electrons. So that was a proof of concept operation when Cern shut down in 2018, in October of 2018. Let me get the exact date here in my notes, I think. I have it. October 24th of 2018. Cern shut down, ended its collisions of protons for what was known then as long run 2, and now they are in long shutdown. They're in the shutdown mode until 2027. So when Cern shut down in 2018, so did Awake. So that experiment is no longer running. Just thought I'd update you. Some of you, like Andy, have asked for updates on Cern, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Also in Japan, there has been a project on the drawing board for a long time, since 2013, something called the International Linear Collider. Again, this is a matter and antimatter collider, not far from the Keck facility, where they're colliding matter and antimatter. The International Linear Collider, ILC, is a proposed linear particle accelerator. It is planned to have a collision energy of 500 GeV, initially with the possibility of a later upgrade to 1000 GeV, or 1 tera electron volt. Although early proposed locations of the ILC were Japan, Europe, specifically Cern, and the USA at Fermilab, the Katakami Highland in the Awadi Prefecture of northern Japan has been the focus of ILC design efforts since 2013. The Japanese government is willing to contribute half of the costs, according to the coordinator study for detectors at the ILC. The ILC would collide electrons with positrons, and it will be between 30 and 50 kilometers long, or 19 to 31 miles long, and more than 10 times as long as the 50 GeV Stanford Linear Accelerator, the longest existing linear particle accelerator. The SLAC at Stanford, as it's known, is not a collider. It's just a straight line linear accelerator with a collision point at one end. Okay. Also, an update from Cern is there are studies for an alternative project at Cern called the Compact Linear Collider, which is underway and would operate at higher energies, up to 3 TeV, whereas the ILC would be 1 TeV, in a machine of length similar to the ILC. The two projects, CLIC and the ILC, have been unified under the Linear Collider collaboration. So 2 projects projected. The latest information I have on CERN's Compact Linear Collider, the CLIC, is that it will come online in 2027, okay? Along with now the high luminosity LHC itself. Now, some of the breaking news that I have that came in today came to me by way of a patron. And I love this. You guys are so good at your research, and you stay on top of things and you send it to us. And we have our own collaboration going on, not just these guys in the science world, but we have our own collaborations here, and it's great because it's amazing what you guys dig up. And let me just see if I can find this real quickly. Give me a second. Take a deep breath here. Okay, here it is. I won't cite the name of the patron that sent this to me because I wasn't up front. I wasn't up front given permission to do that. But what is happening here is they are going to be including electrons, not only in CLIC, but also in the Large Hadron Collider, the high luminosity. It will be called the Large Hadron Electron Collider. Okay? Large Hadron, little e for electron, collider. So it's getting a little complex what the name of the collider will be in 2027 at Cern. It's kind of interesting, kind of fun to see how they're planning all this stuff out. So they have what's called the Electron Ion Collider User Group. And they are going to be developing a beast detector. Okay? So let me read this. Beast detector. The 2015 Long-Range Plan for Nuclear Science in the United States recommended a high-energy, high-luminosity, polarized electron-ion collider as the largest priority, as the highest priority. This was in 2015. They were proposing a high-energy, high-luminosity, polarized electron-ion collider as the highest priority for new facility construction following the completion of presently ongoing projects. The main physics topics to be explored at this new facility are 1. The polarized C-quark and gluon distributions in the nucleon. Number 2, quark quantum chromodynamics, QCD, quantum chromodynamics of the low X high density gluon regime. And number 3, hadronization in the vacuum and the nuclear medium. One of the considered construction options is the addition of a high-energy polarized electron beam to the existing relativistic high heavy ion collider hadron machine. That's at Brookhaven. That's the RHIC that I've talked about so many times at Brookhaven National Laboratory, that they want to add a high energy polarized electron beam to the existing RHIC, converting it into an electron-ion collider, or eRHIC. An eRHIC detector designed to efficiently register and identify deep inelastic electron scattering, or DIS, processes in a wide range of center of mass energies available with the new collider is one of the key components of such an upgrade. The current status of the detector work will be presented with an emphasis on studies done since the first EIC user group meeting in Berkeley. All right, so what does all that mean? This is, again, the search for dark matter. This is, again, trickle-down technology towards the opening of the abyss in this specific high-energy polarized electron beam, employing heavy ions, which is gold and lead, that are used at Brookhaven and also at Cern. This is all about the search for dark matter and ultimately the opening of the abyss. So they're getting closer and closer to this. These are the days, this is the time as they do this, but they project out to 2027. They still think, and this is Satan not knowing, because only the Father knows when the Savior will return. The return of Christ, no one knows, not even Christ himself, only the Father. Satan thinks he has time. Satan thinks he has out until 2027 for these machines to operate. But you know what? God has his own plan and his own timing. If we look at world events, if we look at everything that's going on right now within the world, when we look at something as simple as COVID-19, okay? I mean, that's simple in comparison to what we've been talking about tonight. When we look at everything that is going on, everything that is coalescing together in science, coalescing together on the military fronts, coalescing together in the political arena, the energy arena, all of these things coming together right now. Satan does not have until 2027 to open the abyss. So here's something new for you. The opening of the abyss is going to happen before 2027. How can I say that? Well, look at Revelation. The angel is cast from heaven. That's a sudden event. That's not a pre-planned event. To cast someone out is not something that is done as a planned journey. That angel's not going on vacation. Suddenly, and without warning, an angel is cast from heaven and is given the key to the abyss. Again, interpreting Scripture in the modern day context. This will be a sudden event that will take place once the Holy Spirit, the restrainer, has been removed. Therefore, Satan does not have until 2027. The abyss will not be opened by Satan's technology, is what I'm saying. The abyss will not be opened according to Satan's timeline, 2027, using these accelerators and colliders, specifically Cern. All the others are proof of concept collaborations that send their findings, send their technology over to Geneva to be incorporated. Because the ultimate goal is to open the abyss at the ancient Roman temple site where Cern is located. The temple to Abaddon, Apollyon, the destroyer. They believe that they will open the abyss in Geneva at Cern in 2027. But God's going to do that when he casts the angel unannounced from heaven. He gives the key to the abyss, which I've always maintained is an encrypted code. He will give the private key as an encryption, in cryptography, to decrypt secret information that will allow science to then open the abyss with their technology. That's trickle-down technology that is relevant to mankind. Specifically to the unsaved, it is relevant. For us, the saved, it's relevant. What it means to us is that there's very little time. We don't know when that angel's going to be cast down. We don't know when the abyss will open, but it'll be before 2027, because everything that is in motion to control and change man, specifically, to give you one touch point, DNA. Do you think that they orchestrated this entire COVID-19 to then just put things off until 2027? No. They want it to happen now. They want the changing of human DNA, the enslavement into a serf class of humanity right now. They want to push the opening of the abyss. because the abyss is also DNA. Again, another interpretation of Scripture. DNA, the modification of DNA leads to changes in the DNA that mankind has no awareness, no ability to project the ramifications, what those changes in DNA lead to. Okay? That in a DNA sense, and I mean it literally, this is opening up a DNA-based abyss, because they don't know where these changes in DNA will lead to. We do. It leads to the damnation of the soul in the abyss. Therefore, it is the opening of the abyss by way of modifying DNA. Therefore, the timing of COVID-19, the vaccine, the mark of the beast, changing a person's DNA such that those who take the mark of the beast are no longer, their name is no longer found written in the Lamb's book of life, meaning their DNA has been changed. God doesn't recognize their name, doesn't recognize their DNA. Thus their soul is condemned to the abyss. That is the opening of the abyss. Therefore, because that dynamic, that scenario is underway right now, this is relevant to us today, this is tangible today, because the DNA will soon be modified by the mark of the beast by way of the microneedle array, trickle-down technology, quantum dots, luciferase, hydrogels, all trickle-down technologies, because that is right on the doorstep, perhaps as soon as January, perhaps, according to President Trump and others, early next year. That's why it's relevant to us. That's the abyss of DNA modification. Could it be, here's conjecture, could it be that will coincide with the casting out of heaven the angel who has provided the key to open the abyss? That realizes another interpretation of the word abyss. Could that be a physical opening of a physical abyss in the earth at the ancient Roman temple site to Apollyon at Cern? I don't know. Could be. But I see one interpretation of the abyss in the modification of DNA underway right now, and the mark of the beast underway right now, the damning of souls to the abyss underway right now. This is why I know there are scientists from Cern that listen to these live streams. It became clear and plainly evident years ago, because I was getting emails from scientists at Cern, who of course were chastising me, especially when I was talking about the awake linear accelerator. Chastising me. I know they listen to these live streams. I know they read Entangled magazine. So some of those scientists at CERN are aware of what I'm talking about, and therefore they are aware that this is a spiritual endeavor. Okay? They need to not be the swine. They need not take the Neuralink. They need not become transhumanists with their brain-computer interfaces. They need not partake in that. They need not be like the swine. Okay? But again, they are suffering a strong delusion. Scientists at CERN and other laboratories. They believe they believe, thank you, Julie, I'm reading the chat room as I'm speaking. They believe what Satan has promised them. You see, if they can have a theory, a theorem, a hypothesis labeled with their name, if they can have a new particle named after themselves, if they can produce some new evidence that they can publish under their name and it becomes known as their law, their theorem, their process, that feeds their ego. In addition to promotions and money. Okay? Yes, Perry. The Methuselah detector does have everything to do with strangelets. Okay? No, I have not seen osmium as a heavy ion in any of the colliders. Only gold and lead as heavy ions have been employed to my knowledge, Perry. So I'm just watching the chat room and answering a question. Okay? So let me provide a few moments for more questions. I kind of made my points tonight. Remember, dark matter is about opening the abyss. Strangelets, quarks, quark gluon, the discovery of new particles is a weapons system, strangelets. And the trickle down is to the changing of DNA so that a person loses their soul. They are destroyed for all eternity. That's the goal of Satan with humanity, is to damn everyone's soul for eternity to perdition, because he hates God's creation. Okay? So yeah, they're feeding the ego, they're feeding the hubris. Mr. Wilson, the Goddard Tunnel, yeah, maybe you didn't hear me earlier. The Goddard Tunnel relates to Cern because Cern built their main ring and they placed their accelerators and their collider facilities underground in tunnels. It also relates to quantum computing by way of quantum tunneling as a process to arrive at a solution at the lowest ground state by quantum tunneling through the energy peak that normally would have to be traversed. Okay, so it's quantum tunneling also related to the Goddard Tunnel. Okay? Alrighty. Let's see. Have you heard from Richie from Boston? No, I haven't, Andy. And we can communicate privately through emails regarding Richie from Boston. I won't discuss that on the air. Okay? Alrighty. Don't mind talking privately about it. Okay, I know a lot of you send me his videos to keep me up to date on what he's talking about. I know his main channel, I think he has 3, but one of his 3, his main channel, was just taken down off of YouTube a couple of days ago from what you all have been keeping me apprised of. I typically don't watch his channel, so I know you guys do. You, ladies and gentlemen, you keep me apprised of what he's talking about, and that's great. That's fine. The more truth that gets out there, however it's delivered, with whatever methodology and personality, just get the truth out there. Okay? Lots of people that don't like me and they think I'm boring. Oh well, you know, I'm who I am, and I'm a teacher. Okay? I don't do a lot of production value, a lot of hype, a lot of fear mongering. Kathleen and I just tell it as it is, just as two ordinary people. We just don't get into a whole lot of excess anything. So if anybody feels that these are long and drawn out, 2.5 hour sometimes live streams, and it's just boring material, I'm sorry, you know, I'm just a teacher and I'm just teaching. Okay? That's all there is. Okay, let's see what we got. Thanks, Lynette. Thank you. Alrighty, so I'm happy to take some questions. I know this stuff was way down in the weeds tonight, but what I do, remember, I'm speaking to scientists out there. I'm speaking to engineers. I get emails, as I shared with you, about the upgrading of the relativistic heavy ion collider and Cern utilizing electrons. I understand many of the patrons and many of the listeners that are not patrons have a deep scientific background, and they expect me to provide the deep research. They expect me to provide as accurate as I can do it. I mean, I'm not a PhD in physics. As accurate as I can, even with the biology. I am not a PhD in bioengineering. I try, Kathleen and I try as lay people to present as accurate as we can in the scientific explanations as we can. So I'm trying to address those scientists in the audience that expect that of me, okay? And yet I need to try to translate it into information that is intelligible and relevant to you, so that I'm not completely boring you to death, okay? A living fountain says, I enjoy the weeds. It's about time. Okay, good. See, there are those that like the deep rabbit trails and rabbit holes that we go down sometimes. Let's see here. Thank you, Marilyn. Andy says, do you think Cern can fire up their collisions at any time they so desire? They can at low level collisions. The main ring will not be ready till 2027. That has to do with the updating of the magnets and a lot of other technology I've covered before, and I don't have time tonight to cover. But a lot of the machinery that is being installed takes time to do, and it's going to take until 2027. But remember, collisions do not have to be. Andy, this is a really good question. You do not have to circulate beams of particles in opposite directions within a ring to collide particles. You can use a linear accelerator like Liniac 4, and there are a couple of other even smaller linear accelerators at Cern. You can use a fixed target at the end of the beam line, okay? And with the proton and the superproton synchrotrons that feed the main ring, they have beam lines that come off of those synchrotrons, like they do at Berkeley, like they do at Brookhaven. With other ring-based synchrotrons, they have straight beam lines that come off the rings that have fixed endpoint targets where particles can be directed in a straight line, impact the fixed target, thus colliding particles. When I say typically about colliding particles with a ring-based, it's crossing the streams or head-on impacts, such as in the main ring, okay? So yes, Andy, to answer your questions, with fixed targets at the end of straight beam lines from linear accelerators and straight beam lines off of ring-based synchrotrons at Cern and other synchrotrons, they can conduct collision experiments prior to 2027. What I call low energy collisions. They're in the giga electron volt range, okay? Not in the tera electron volt range. Cern was commissioned in 1954. They broke ground in 1953. My date of birth was 1953, which again is God's sense of humor, okay? I was born in the same year that Cern broke ground, and then they commissioned the machine in 1954. Okay. Germany and the BELLE, Kathleen's talking about. Let's go back to Nazi Germany and the BELLE project. The BELLE project used red mercury in a bell-shaped jar. Remember BELLE that I showed you in the graphic tonight from Beauty and the Beast, the bell-shaped glass jar with the rose, and the rose disintegrates into particles, and you see the pink glow. The pink glow. Let me put it up. This is really cool. I'm glad you brought this up. Let me get that up on the screen. Okay. That's Daniel in the bell. That's the other reason we mentioned this on Sunday. Kathleen read the scriptures from Daniel, Belle, and the dragon. That's where Beauty and the Beast comes from. The story, okay, comes from Daniel, Belle, and the dragon. The dragon you saw in the Beast logo from Japan, from Keck, as Godzilla, the red dragon from Daniel, okay? Let me get this up there. There we are. The bell jar, the red-pink interior glow. We're talking the bell, which in Nazi Germany was this same bell jar shape and had red mercury confined by magnets, just like they do with particle colliders, confining the particles with magnets inside the Nazi bell. And with those steering magnets, they rotated red mercury within the bell in opposite directions, contra-rotating bands of red mercury that were colliding, producing a red glow. Okay? I don't have to make this up. You're seeing it right on the screen. Resulted in synchrotron energies. Remember, when particles are moving in a curved trajectory under acceleration, orthogonally at right angles, are thrown off. Remember the wet tennis ball on a string analogy I gave you. Orthogonal lines of magnetic force are produced. Gamma ray energies, particles, are thrown off. And hard X-rays, high luminosity X-rays. Those are synchrotron energies and magnetic lines of force. All right? Those all were produced by the Nazi bell. All those forces, all those energies. This is why, and you've read the narratives about the Nazi bell, where the first group of scientists that created the Nazi bell, they were irradiated, they were poisoned by the gamma rays and the X-rays, thrown off by the Nazi bell, and it killed them. Then they figured it out that they needed to bring in lead shielding, and a new group of scientists were brought into the research program. The story, the mythology, the mythos surrounding the Nazi bell, again, the name Belle in Japan, is that there was a rift in time, a portal, if you will, an interdimensional gateway briefly was opened, and demons came forth through that interdimensional portal, and then it slammed shut. That's the mythos. Okay? All right? So, Belle, Beauty and the Beast, and the bell jar, and the rose, and the red color, and the particles of the disintegrating rose, the rose replicating the particles thrown off by way of collisions of particles. It's all right there. It's all spiritual. I would venture to say, not only can you not separate the physical from the spiritual, but there is more spiritual power than there is physical power. That's for a whole nother live stream and discussion. The rose floats due to magnetism. I would agree with that, Kathleen. I would agree. All right, guys. We're over 2 hours again. Thank you for your questions. Lynette, let's see. The pagan god Kek is the deification of the concept of primordial darkness in the ancient Egyptian Ogdoad Cosmology of Hermopolis. Thank you. I think you sent that to me, Lynette, as an email, and thank you for that. Thank you for that reminder. Keck, yes. Keck and help me, Lynette. Keck. It's escaping me right at the moment. Anyway, I'm too tired to recall it. Let's wrap this one up. We'll take care of it on Thursday. Joe Bag of Donuts. Yeah, Joe Bag of Donuts. Lemon-filled donuts. White powdered sugar. Yeah, Joe Bag of Donuts has to be able to relate to the information that Kathleen and I present here. We have to be able to make it relevant to anyone. So we try to cover the full spectrum of interest and backgrounds without being condescending to anyone. Okay? All right. Thank you for bearing with me on this technical trickle-down discussion of technologies, but remember, it's all connected, it all works together. Most of it, if not all of it, works against mankind because Satan hates us. But we have the most powerful weapon system on the planet. We have the most powerful weapons system on the planet. Stronger than strangelets, and that's prayer. And Satan hates that weapon system. He hates the knowledge we're getting through prayer. He hates what you are learning through prayer. Okay? It's amazing. Yes, Keck is associated with Q and the gamers. It means laughing out loud. Either you or Lynette sent that to me about the laughing out loud, LOL, in the gamers community. Keck also means laughing out loud. Just amazing, amazing. Thank you guys for your education of us. Please, we are honored by your prayer requests. Feel free to email those to us at anthonypatchauthor@gmail.com or use the contact tab at anthonypatch.com, and we definitely will pray for you. We have many that are suffering illnesses, their loved ones as well. We pray for all of those that have emailed us. Okay? And we pray for all of you as patrons. Thank you so very much for your patronage. And I want to make one clarification before I close. One more clarification. I shared with you the link to the video of the Italian doctor who was talking about COVID-19. In the latter half of his video that I posted to you, at the request of numerous patrons who said, do you have the link to that video? It's been pulled down off of YouTube, and it was on BitChute, I believe it was, the link that I sent to you. And so in response to multiple requests for that video, I sent it out to the patrons. The second half of that video, the Italian doctor, deviates from our position, Kathleen and my position, regarding the microneedle array and the vaccine mark of the beast. And some of you have written to me pointing that out and asking, what are my thoughts about what the doctor is saying? Well, the doctor is entitled to his opinion. He's entitled to his own theology. I would urge the doctor and those that have listened to him to do their research into the mark of the beast in Scripture, and then lay that side by side with the technology within the microneedle array itself, and the end result of taking that microneedle array delivered quantum dot luciferase vaccine, which will change the host DNA. I don't think the doctor was aware of the information that we've presented to you regarding the changing of the host DNA by the messenger RNA virus or the DNA-based virus that will enter the nucleus of every cell, and thus by the doctors that we presented their own transcripts were provided in Entangled magazine that the host DNA, by doctors' statements, not by conjecture on the part of Kathleen and myself, but I don't think the Italian doctor knew of this information from other doctors, that it in fact will change the host DNA and change it permanently. And therefore he deviates from our position, and I want to clarify that he deviates from our position, so that you are not confused as to what our position is. And absolutely definitively, we know that the microneedle array patch is the delivery mechanism that will result in the changing of a person's DNA. Thus it is the mark of the beast. Thus it is the damnation of a person's soul to perdition for all eternity. Okay? Thank you very much for all of your patronage, all of your information that you send to us, everything that you share with us. I read through, I'm a voracious speed reader. I read all of the emails that come in. Okay? So thank you very much. Until Thursday, God bless you. And let me put myself back on the screen for my closing statement so it's not just Belle sitting there looking at you. There we are. I'm not as good looking. But anyway, at least I'm not in a bell. And I just leave it at that, I guess. Thursday, not sure what we're going to cover, but there's always new information coming out every single day. If you have ideas of topics you would like us to cover that are of interest to you, we are always, always, always as responsive to those topics as we possibly can be. So please email them to us and we'll try our best to cover them for you. So God bless you all, and thank you very much, and good night.